Is attendance enabled?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I actually don't remember who all did I agree to make the chauffeurs today. Abhinay, I remember one, right? You were there. Who
Yes, sir.
else? Yeah, who else? Because there were so many names, I just like picked up the top four, I guess, or five, something like that. Pranav, you were there yesterday, na? So I think for today itself there was some kind of advance booking. I don't remember that. I don't want to go through the lecture recording. Okay, Jay, you were there. Sudeep, you are there. Uh,
Sir,
do
I
you
have a
remember?
screenshot. I'll see. So first was Rohit, then I, then Nehal, then Sudeep.
For that was for like tomorrow, right? I mean, when we said who
Yes, sir.
wanted. Acha.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Rohit said, "Sir, can I wish effort for tomorrow? First come, first serve." Then I copy pasted the same thing. Then Nehal said, "Sir, me tomorrow." Then Sudeep said, "Me tomorrow."
Okay, so yeah, so let us say you were there, na, yesterday. So you already are getting kind of good marks
Yeah,
for
okay, that's
shepherding.
fine. That's fine.
है ना? So let's find someone else. So Abhinay is there, Sudeep, uh, okay, Jay,
Rohit, Nehal.
Rohit. How many are there? Char हो गए, right? Four. Okay, okay, Nehal can be one, five. Okay, so we have five, right? Abhinay, Jay, Sudeep, Nehal, and Rohit. Okay, are you all online? Let me check. If you are online, please tell me your roll numbers and stuff. Just a minute, let me open the sheet. This is CSAI. Start with your roll numbers and section, guys.
Sir Abhinay Pandey, LCI 2020-012, CSAI.
Okay, got it. Next,
Sir Jay Mehta, CA 16.
yes, 16. Got it. Next,
Sir Sudeep, CSAI 2.
CSAI 2. Got it. Next,
Sir, both LCI 49.
CI 49. 49. Got it. And next, one more, right? Who's left? Let me go back to chats. It's okay. Okay, fine. So Nehal has voluntarily given up. Anyone who would like to take that place? Not Pranav. Pranav has done it. Anyone who would like to take that place? Okay, Arunim. Arunim, your roll number and
CS25. CS25.
25. Okay. Okay, so we have 5 people. Oh, just a minute. I made a mistake. But I think it's fine. I actually wrote it in the sheet for but I should probably, guys, please tell me again, because I made a mistake. I just added it in the yesterday's column itself. Just a minute. Let me make it 2nd of March. Okay, so Jay is today. Okay, Nishchal was yesterday. Arunim is today. Who else? Sahil yesterday, right? And CSAI. Just a minute, guys. Sometimes I have to do some bookkeeping work. Sudeep is today. Rama was yesterday. Abhinay is today. Who else? Divya was yesterday. Rohit is today. Okay, I think I have got it cleared. Yeah, so we can start, guys. Okay, let me. How many people? We have 50. Okay. And by the way, this is our last actual content lecture. From tomorrow, we are going to start with revision. There will be no attendance from tomorrow. Yay moment for so many of you. So there will be no attendance. You can, if you want to attend the lecture, you can. Otherwise, it's fine. There will be, of course, if the attendance is not compulsory, so there will be no quiz as well. So basically, today is going to be the last content lecture. Okay, guys, let me share the screen. Can you guys see my screen? I hope you can see my screen now. My screen, is it visible, guys?
Yes, sir.
Visible. Okay, so then you guys can start.
Basically, the first question is about what is the objective of pre-processing in C. So before the program gets compiled, there is a task that the compiler do, and those tasks are like basically just checking out all these include files and type defs and hash defines and all those things. So basically, it checks all that and replaces, like if we have a hash defined. So it's not that key hash define will be called when your program is executed. It is replaced by the text everywhere. It is called the hash define, and that happens in the pre-processing. So the objective of pre-processing is to get your program ready to be compiled, and like this is the procedure of your running of a program, that the first step is pre-processing, then comes the compiler, and then the assembly and linker and all. So this is pre-processor.
Any queries? So everyone understand why we have something like a preprocessor. So essentially, there are certain things which does not really concern the compiler. Okay, at the end of the day, compiler just wants to compile code. Anything else that is kind of managerial work, right? That managerial work is done by your preprocessor. That managerial work involves fetching codes from different places so that your program has all the necessary declarations right? So for instance, if you are going to use printf in your program, there has to be a declaration that tells the compiler this is what printf looks like, right? So all um, all those managerial tasks are done by the preprocessor, and then once you have a complete set of code, then that code goes to the compiler for compilation. Any doubts on this? Okay, uh, fine. So let's move ahead, guys.
Okay, so I'm taking the second question. The hash include derivative is used to include the header files either in the current directory if we use the double quotes, or in the compiler's original directory if you use the angular brackets. Basically, you can use the code of someone else in your program by using the hash include directive.
And in fact, if you want to keep a list of good functions that you have, that like suppose you have a sorting function, and you don't want to call that write it every time in your program. So you can have a separate file which you can name something like your name abhinay.cpp, and you can do hash include abhinay.cpp in your program. So you can include even your files. It's not necessary that the pre-built hash include iostream is allowed. You can also include your functions from other files.
So is this part clear, guys? What exactly is the objective of using these hash include directive? Now can you understand? And when basically the most important part is hash include, it is nothing special really. It is just like saying you're going to copy some stuff from one place and you're going to place it at another place. Okay, in fact, this is also a problem with hash include, that hash include is pretty dumb as in if you write hash include stdir.h and then in the next line again hash include stdir.h, if you write it twice, your code will actually be added twice to the to the source code of that particular program, right? Because it's simple copy paste kind of stuff. Okay, so that is why hash include is probably not the best thing to do. Especially, I mean, it is the best thing to do, as in if you are trying to manage your code properly, you have to be very careful. Otherwise, there will be a problem that we will discuss later. Any queries? Okay, so I don't think many people have probably watched. Uh, yes, kind of. And plus, not only shorter, there are multiple uses for hash include that basically when you start, you'll have a subject called software engineering. I don't know when it would be, maybe uh, third year, I guess, in your curriculum. But in software engineering, you will read about a principle. Okay, this principle is known as high cohesion and low coupling. So what does it really mean? That whenever you are writing some code, whenever you are building an application, you should divide it in terms of units, okay? And all these units should have high cohesion and low coupling. What does it mean? That within a particular unit, whatever you are writing, it should make absolute sense, right? So for example, if you are writing uh, let us say a file which is going to handle string operations, okay, so then you put all the string related functions in one file, okay, so it is highly cohesive in nature. That is, I mean, everything that belongs to this unit, it has strong relationship with the other elements. At the same time, you should try to keep the coupling to be low. What does coupling mean? That any two units are almost independent of each other, that you can use one over the other without requiring because without really needing some other unit before you can use it. It's just a very crude concept. It's called high cohesion and low coupling. So the same funda is here, that you would like to have a particular source file to only contain code that is relevant for that particular application, or for that particular unit, as I said, right? And then any other functions, uh, any other utilities that you are going to use, you simply put it in another file and then include that file in your file, so that it is easier to read that code. Okay, so that is the idea. It's good from the perspective of readability, maintainability, and at the same time, it is actually, you're actually reducing your own work, right? I mean, instead of writing everything every time, you are basically saying just copy it from there and put it here. So any other doubts about hash include? Okay, go ahead, guys.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Uh,
Yeah, sure.
Sir, does hash include directive also occupies the stack memory?
See, I mean, memory is something else. See, what happens is, when you compile some code, it gets changed into object code. Okay, and at the time of running your code, it is that object code that runs. Okay, it is not really the code that you write. Okay, the actual code that executes at the time is the object code. Now, this is what this is where you have to understand that the compiler never actually sees these hash include things, right? So who produces the object code? The object code is produced when it is compiled. The source code, the C code, is compiled, then object code is produced. But the compiler never sees these hash includes. Okay, for compiler, as a, if you remember a picture that I have given in the presentation, so basically, that red, orange, yellow kind of thing, that basically for compiler there is some yellow and that is followed by some green. Okay, it doesn't know that this yellow has come via a hash include statement. Okay, for it's just like something has been copied and pasted. So the stack thing, that is actually at the runtime of the program. When you are executing the program, then we talk about a stack. We are currently not there. Okay, we are currently at the level of just before compiling the code. Okay, so what happens right before compiling the code? So these hash include directive, it comes at that step. Okay, once your program has been built into an executable, then hash include doesn't even matter. Does it answer your question?
Okay, sir.
Any other queries? Okay, so you guys can move
Sir,
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
sir, instead of hash include, can we use another thing like
Sahil, I'm not sure I could hear you properly. You can type your question maybe, and you guys can move ahead. Any other questions? Okay, so you can move ahead, guys.
I can take up the third question.
Okay.
So in the hash defined directive, basically we can declare some constants like size of array 10. So the size of array thing, so hash defined directive consists of two parts, the identifier and the string. Identifier is the part which will get replaced by the string in the program. So hash define can be used to declare some constants like size of array to 10, and it can also be used for defining some functions. These functions are basically mathematical functions, not the C functions. Like, for example, in the example, my voice is fine. Hello?
Yes, it's fine.
It's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So yeah, so the mathematical functions, for example, the example showed in Sir's slide that hash defines square x and then x asterisk x. So wherever in the program there is square x, it will get replaced by x into x. For it is more of a generic type that we can input any number inside that function and we can get the output which is there in the string inside the hash defined directive.
Yeah, it looks like there is some WebEx problem maybe. Uh, uh, yeah, go ahead, guys. So I could only hear half of it, but I hope that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask like that can we use recursive thing in hash define like square x is x asterisk square x.
Uh, I don't think so. You can. It is going to be a problem because first of all, uh, the things that you write within a macro are fairly restrictive. Um, and remember that you have to understand it like this. This code is going to get copy pasted from point A to point B. Okay, it's more like just a simple replacement of your parameter. Okay, so many types of codes cannot be written inside a macro, but um, so I think recursion cannot be used. I've never tried it. It's a very good question, to be honest. Uh, but for recursion, you still need some kind of conditional processing, right? Because you need to write if something. Because how would you end the recursion? At some point of time, you need to end the recursion, right? You need some conditional way to stop recursion, right? So I have never tried using any conditional statements within a macro. So even I don't know. But it's actually a bad idea. Let me say this because what is really happening is that this is just a kind of uh, copy paste, right? So even if you if somehow you can manage a recursive macro, you're basically trying to copy paste in a recursive fashion, which to me becomes a very difficult thing to imagine.
So maybe we can write many hash defines. For example, in the first hash define, we want to square, so square x and x asterisk x. In the second hash define, if we want to cube the x, we can write cube x, then x asterisk square x. Like
Yeah,
that we can do.
that you can do. So that you can call one macro from another macro. That there is no issue. Because see what is going to happen, it is just going to be replacement, right? So if you want to make it cube, then basically x asterisk comes from the cube macro and x asterisk x comes from the square macro, right? So that you can do, but recursion is something else, right? Recursion means you're trying to call square x from square x. That I don't think so whether even if it is possible or not, because I have never really thought about recursive macros. Um, but yeah, it's going to be difficult to imagine what would a recursive macro look like, because this is, as I said, right, this is basically copy pasting stuff. So what really would happen, even I don't know. Okay, there are some questions on, yeah, any so Sahil, maybe you can try it out. Write some small code with a recursive macro. I personally feel it should produce a compilation error itself. uh,
Yes, sir, because it will just copy paste and it doesn't know. Like then, if there is a macro named x, then it doesn't know what x is
right, so
after
yeah.
after it has changed.
Yeah, so really, I mean, to me, the best guess I can make is that this is going to result into a compilation error. But I am not the judge, right? The actual judge is the someone who writes the code and executed that person will have the last say. So Sahil, just try it and tell us all, right? Okay. So Sahil, okay, I think the other Sahil has a question. We have one library function for. Is hash include necessary? Can we use any other thing like we have one library function? Uh, um,
Sir, I was trying to say that can we replace hash include with any other thing?
any other thing, as in you're coming up with a new directive or what?
Yes, sir.
I don't think so. You can
Hash.
create a new pre-processor directive. Um, I mean, I've never really again, I've not thought about that. You'll have to go and check how the pre-processor works if you want to come up with a new directive. Uh, uh, but yeah, I mean, I don't think so. It is that easy. You'll have to go and check the pre-processor's code and change it and rebuild it. It's a very complicated process. Uh,
Okay, sir.
okay. So Divya has a question, guys. Someone can take it, please. Functions and macros.
So basically
Sir,
it's question 4, so it will be covered in that.
Yeah, okay, I got it. So let's move ahead, guys. Any other queries? So you guys understand the use cases of hash define? What are the use cases of hash define? One you have already used for defining simple constants. Another one is to define macros, right? And the third one is basically we'll have a look at when the multiple inclusion problem is discussed. You'll get to know why it is used. Any other queries other than this? Okay, so guys, you can move ahead.
So can I take the fourth one?
Yes, sure.
yeah.
So macros can be useful when you have some less computation in the functions, like you have to calculate the square or cube of something. Then you have to create the function prototype declaration in the function definition, return type, and the arguments. These can be, if these can be you can say waste of time in when you are doing a competitive programming. So you can use the macros for this by using a hash define, like in insert slide square of x and x asterisk x in all the places in your program where you will use square of x, it will get replaced by x square, but you cannot do much more computations than this in Marcos. So this can be one of the disadvantage.
Another disadvantage is that basically it's not a big disadvantage. What I feel that if you have a lot of macro call and your macro is also a big macro, so it will replace the code and the length of the code will increase. But I don't think it will affect the compile time, because definitely it's just going through those lines. And there are other differences between macros and functions. Like in a function, if you run a debugger in your program, debugger is just simply, it gives you a lot of tools to debug your program. So there is a feature that you can follow how the program is running line by line. So you can define a macro and you can define a function, and you'll see that in a macro the control of the program continues in that particular function. Like if it is an int main only, then it will remain in int main. But if we call a function, then its control will go to that function first, then it will execute, then come back, then go, then come back. So this is the difference between a macro and a function, that macros just replace the text. It's nothing. It's just for your it's like using control F and replacing, like find and replace tool. Basically, it's just for that. And so definitely the speed of execution is faster in macros because it doesn't require the call. It's just normally running it. So these are the differences. But yeah, it increases the code length.
Yeah, so there is something known as inline functions. If you guys have heard this term, maybe from your C++ uh, coding, whatever is called it, right? Coding classes. So there is something known as inline functions. You can go and read about them. I'll just type it here. So you can read about what are inline functions. So macros are a kind of inline function. So what really means by inline function is there are two ways to implement function calls. Okay, one is that you maintain the code related to a function separately, and then you add a jump statement that is at the level of assembly language. At the level of assembly language, you add a jump statement. So whenever there is a function call, you jump to that part of the memory where the code for the function is written. You execute it, and then you return back. Okay, so this is the case that we have seen. For all these things, we use stack and stuff like that. The other way to implement functions at the level of assembly language is that you simply copy and paste the code of that function every time there is a function call. Okay, so now how are these two different? There is a trade-off. What happens is whenever you have to create a stack frame and make a jump and then come back, it takes up some time and resources. Okay, so at the time of executing your program, it is slightly slower as compared to simply copying and pasting the content of the function at that particular position itself. However, the actual code length is not that high, right? Because especially if you are making a lot of function calls in your code, uh, the actual code in assembly language is still very compact. With inline functions, it is the opposite. That when you copy paste stuff at the place of a function call, the code size increases because you're now copying the same code multiple times in your executable, but the execution time is reduced. uh no, anonymous functions are something different. Anonymous functions are inline, but they are not exactly the same, right? uh, I mean, in fact, I'm not even sure whether they are built to be completely inline either. um, that frankly I don't know what is the implementation way for
Sir, anonymous functions are basically like if you want like if you have a like JavaScript is basically used for HTML and all.
yeah.
So basically, if you have a button and you want to given a function that should run when you will click on that, and it is a very small function or something like that,
Yeah,
and you don't want to define it with a name, so
yeah,
you will keep it anonymous. So
yeah,
just
yeah.
that's
No,
the
no.
difference, that it
I
doesn't
know.
have a name.
Yeah, I know
And
the.
like
Huh. I'm saying that I still don't know whether when it is actually see, because JavaScript is a different kind of language. It is not so you don't generate an object code for JavaScript. So JavaScript is interpreted as in your browser has a JavaScript interpreter, and whenever it sees some JavaScript code, it interprets it on the fly. You understand? So there is a difference between compiling a language and compiler versus interpreter. There are two terms. So what I am trying to say is I really don't know what happens when what is the way the interpreter interprets it. Okay, I don't know
Sir,
whether.
it is totally the same as normal functions. Just the difference is it has no name. You can have a lot of execution, and it is not only inline, and it can be normal function like too, but just it
Okay,
doesn't have a name.
yeah, because okay, I got it. So basically inline, see, uh okay, got it. So basically, you're trying to say that whenever it's like this, right? Inline function only makes sense anyhow when we are trying to use it multiple times. You understand? If it is the same code that is so usually you do things like this, right? I mean, let me just type some code. You do something like on click equal to um, form dot submit. I'm just typing some very childish JavaScript because it's long. It's very long since I wrote any JavaScript code. But something like this, right? So basically, whatever this code is, right? This form. Oh, this chat. So this form dot submit, whatever it belongs to, it is in a kind of inline code, right? That now you can also wrap it up inside a function if you want. So usually you use these kind of codes in JavaScript where you just want to write, let us say, a single statement or a couple of statements. So you, and that too you would like to be done for a specific case only, right? It's not like you're going to use it multiple times. So any anonymous functions you in Java, and I think maybe in C++ also, there are even anonymous classes actually. So the idea is that they are one-time use code. Okay, uh, that you're going to use that code only for one particular instance. So it doesn't make sense to give it a proper name, right? You can simply say, if this is the context, please run this code. Okay, I don't care whatever you call it. You call it ABCD or PQRS. So that is the concept of anonymous classes and anonymous functions. Um, what I'm trying to say is, uh, because C is a compiled language that you basically generate an object code, and then at the time of execution, it is this object code that is that is executed. As compared to that, JavaScript is not a compiled language. Okay, JavaScript is simply an interpreted language. You have a JavaScript interpreter. So I really don't know how exactly the interpreter does it. Whether it is kind of inline, whether it first, whether there is some function break or something like that. I really don't know. That is what. Okay, because I have never really studied JavaScript from the perspective of implementation. So right. So sorry. I mean, I drifted away. Uh, maybe I'll have a look at it. I have some friends who are JavaScript experts. There is a friend who's working in improving JavaScript's security. So maybe I'll talk to him. Okay, anyhow, is the concept of an inline function clear? That basically you are just uh, you know uh, you're just pasting the code of a function at the time of the function call itself. Okay, it's as simple as that. So clearly it is going to improve your performance. So because there is no jump statement, um, but it is going to increase the size of your code. Okay, and as I
So
said, right?
inline function,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so inline function, yes, I was, so inline function is like a mixture of define and normal functions, like macros and normal functions. Like normal functions we use for calling something, and for macro function we copy paste.
So see, I know that there is a specific way to make a function inline in C++. There used to be an inline keyword. I'm not sure whether it is still there or not. But there used to be an inline keyword. If you want to make a function to be inline, you can simply say inline and something like this, right? So then the compiler will basically make sure that it is made an inline function at the time of compiling the code. Um, as I said, right, the reason for inline is performance. You would probably want some code to become inline because you want performance. Macros are always inline. That is the idea, because they are just copy paste. Normal functions in general are not inline. Okay. In general, they are not inline.
There also
Does that?
like so if we use square x with hash define, and we use square x with a normal function,
Mhm,
and that call is being used multiple times, like many times
mhm.
we are calling the square x function, so which would be better?
As I said, right, the better part depends on what do you want. Okay, if you want the size of your code to be as small as possible, then it is better to make it a function, because then the code size doesn't really change much. Okay, you just uh, keep it at one place and then make a jump statement to that place. If you want better performance as in better running time, then it is better to use a macro. Okay,
So
so it
also
is
one thought, like if we use inline function and it copy paste the code of what is there inside the function we defined above. Sir, if
Yeah.
it gets return 0, like
Mm-hmm.
it was saying that like return a, but a came out to be 0. So will the function end or like
Uh, so if I understand, so basically you're saying that there is an inline function and there is a return statement. This is, I mean, sorry, actually the WebEx is not really too kind
yes, sir,
today.
like normally we like if we define a function like int square of x and we
Uh-huh.
define it as return x star x.
Yeah, yeah.
So if we define some function which has a return statement and the return uh, at some like example the return becomes 0. So
Mm-hmm.
the when the function is called, the code will get a return 0 statement. So will the code end
Oh,
if we
no, no,
don't
no,
get?
no, no. It's not like that. So um, it's like this. If you are defining an inline function, right, and if you have a return statement in there, um, that is taken care of. That doesn't mean that the return 0 will apply to main. Okay, that doesn't happen. That those things are taken care of by your compiler. That whenever you return a value, it is not seen as the return statement for the function itself from where you are calling it. Was this your doubt? I'm sorry.
Yes, I got it.
So actually, I mean the problem is with WebEx. I'm not able to uh, like hear clearly. Maybe you can drop me an email. Okay. Yeah, actually, Nehal, to be honest, they are not at all functions. They are basically just control C, control V. It is as simple as that. Uh, there is a place where you define some text to be pasted, and because even inline functions have to follow certain properties, like you still have to use proper data types. Okay, you cannot, for example, uh, pass a double as an argument where the expected argument is integer. You can't do it with even an inline function. But with a macro, there is really no data type. It is just simple copy paste. Okay. So there is just an x, right? X could be anything. Okay. I mean, you can actually pass a string as x as well if it makes sense. You understand that? If there is, let us say, a sum operation which is defined over integers as well as strings, some operation, then it doesn't matter. You pass a string to the macro, okay? Because at the end of the day, it is just going to be a. In fact, in Java, you can do that. You can write 5 plus 5, or you can write hello plus world. Okay, uh, they are both valid statements. Hello plus world will simply concatenate hello and world. But of course, Java doesn't have these things like this. Uh, Predefined macros, so because see, now you can understand that why all these libraries use macros so often, um, because it's so when libraries are written, the major concern is performance. Okay, they want to have a function or a feature which is really fast. So that is why most of our libraries define macros like these. So if you have to go and you can go and read what is the definition of that particular macro. Okay, you can see hash defines something, and then there will be something after that. But from what I understand, it will probably be used for the third use case. Strings like these underscore underscore time, um, it may be used for the third use case of hash define. That I mean, what question are we currently on? uh, I think the fourth question, right? So when we'll discuss question number 5, maybe then you will understand what are these underscore underscore things. Okay. um, any other queries, guys? Yeah, Kirti, we will talk about hash if parts now. That is the last question. So uh, any other queries, guys? So there are certain things that we have to understand. First of all, I don't know what will happen if you try to do recursion in macros. Sahil is going to write some simple code and tell us what will happen. But to me, it looks like it is going to give some kind of compilation error. Um, what compilation error, that I don't know, but some compilation error it should give. The second thing is macros are more like inline functions. If you are studying C++ currently, there is an inline keyword also in C++. So if you may know what an inline function is. They're not exactly functions, but they work like inline functions. But essentially they are just copy paste. Okay, whatever you have defined as the body of the macro, that simply gets pasted at the point where the macro is called. Okay, any other doubts? And this is why that is another thing. If I'm in theory, you should be able to, because it is just going to copy and paste that stuff there, right? But again, you have to be very careful about what you write with inside a macro. Okay, because you have to imagine it like this, that whenever you are calling that macro, that whole body is going to get pasted there. So whatever you are writing in the if condition, you have to write your if condition properly, right? That is why people usually do not write if conditions in macros, because there is no data type of x, for example, right? And if you want to write a condition with if statement, that you will probably need a data type, right? I mean, you will write what if x is double equal to y, or if x is greater than 5, something like this, right? So you know that now your macro has become data type specific, but the compiler doesn't know, the preprocessor doesn't know this. Okay, so you have to be very careful about using your macros if you are using something like this in a macro. Okay, and in fact, one of the classic examples, it is there in your reference book as well, is something like this. Let us say, if you want in the square function, let us say if you write something like this, square I plus plus. Okay, so you might feel that what will it do? It will calculate the square and then uh, increment I by 1, right? This is what is intuitive. This is what you will feel will happen, that because it is it is uh, post operator, right? Post increment operator. Basically it is equivalent to writing uh, square I equal to I plus 1, right? This is what we know, this is what it should mean. But now what happens is really is something like this. If you have written something like this, sq equal to square I plus plus, it gets pasted as q equal to I plus plus I plus plus. Now you understand what is the problem, because it is simple copy paste. So you are actually going to get the thing, it will get incremented by 2. Does this example tell you why it is not safe to use macros? Because essentially it is just a copy paste. So everything, so x asterisk x gets replaced by I plus plus asterisk I plus plus. Is it clear, guys? I mean, can you understand the reason why it is dangerous to use macros? Because it is simple, uh, simple replacement, and it might give you unexpected answers as well. So you have to be very careful, even if you're going to put an if condition inside a macro. You have to be very careful about how that if condition will be evaluated, because it is simply copy paste. Okay, so shall we move ahead, you guys? Yeah, that is right. I mean, uh, let me be very frank. I have never used macros when I wrote code. Okay, uh, I always used functions, because functions are much easier to deal with. Okay, um, Nihal, I think the the usually macros are good for only very simple substitutions, like LL, long things like this. So usually we should not use it for let us say size of, I think, things like size of, that you simply go and paste something there. um, so instead of size of, you define a macro s of or something like this. Okay, so where you are absolutely sure that the data type doesn't matter, size of can take anything, right? So very simple use cases. um, I personally do not use macros. Okay, so but because it is a part of the language, I have just told you. And but you will see a lot of macros in the library functions, because they use macros more like uh, inline code. So you might see macros being defined in library functions, in library files, the .h files, but I personally don't use them. It for me it is very hard to manage the macros. Okay,
Sir,
so
in the
go ahead.
sir, in this macro like hash define, we don't specify the data type. So what, like if we give int, like in square x we will use int. So by default, does it take long, long int, or
That
just
is what, right? That basically it doesn't care. It's more like a placeholder. This I plus plus example, no, you can see that the preprocessor doesn't care what you are passing as x. Okay, it will simply go and paste that code there. Now it is possible that that code doesn't make any sense in that context. You understand? You can probably give it a character array as square character array, ARR. Okay, the preprocessor doesn't care. It is simply going to write character array asterisk character array. Okay, but then compiler will complain that you cannot square a character array like that. Okay, so this is the idea. Um it is simultaneously a power as well as a liability, that a simple dumb substitution, it can work in certain cases, because now, as I said, you don't have to write three square functions, one for int, one for float, and one for double. That one square function, that one square macro works for all. Okay, you don't have to write three different square functions for three different data types. So that is the advantage. The disadvantage is that you can also try to square a character array, which doesn't make any sense, right? So great powers come with great responsibility. So now it's up to you how to use it. Does it make sense, guys? That basically it is simple copy paste. It's as if you had written the same code there. The compiler will not see the macro, the compiler will see the pasted code. Okay, uh, sorry. So shall we move to the most important part, right? The multiple inclusion thing. Please go ahead, guys.
Should I take it? So basically what happens is when you're working on bigger projects and you are given a particular module to program and particular component to program, so you don't know what all header files are included in the parent programs. In your, like, if you're including a header file, you don't know if what all things it defines and what all things if it is defining or not. So sometimes it might happen, like when we were on the second question, I think, then sir told us that if we hash include IOStream twice, then it will populate the namespace twice, and it will affect the program and its compilation, because it will have the definitions twice. So that is basically the multiple inclusion problem. It is intuitive that including something multiple times is the problem. So to overcome that, to know that if so and so is included or not, if this is included or not. So what we do is something we use something called include guards or something, hash include guards like that. So basically what it is, it gives us normal if else statement, and there is a syntax for it. But if we talk generally, then we can check if a particular token or if a particular thing is defined or not. if it is defined, then it is okay. Then we don't need it. But if it is not defined, then we can define it. Then we can tell all these functions to define. So basically, it is a bit complex thing, and I don't think over the time of our student life will face it much. But it's we can just understand the concept that it is used to check if the thing is already defined. The thing is like hash if n def something like that. So if it is defined, then we can define the function. If it is defined, then we are okay with it. We won't define it multiple times. But if it is not defined, then we'll define it. So this is how we use it. So this is the multiple inclusion problem.
Yeah, so it is actually a bit complex. I was not even sure whether I should discuss it with you guys or not, but I don't think any discussion on C's, C's preprocessor is complete without talking about the hash if and hash if and def kind of things. So I just included it. Maybe it's, as Abhinay said, it's a bit too advanced for you guys to understand, but the idea is, that is why I used those slides. So let me just maybe share the slides once again so that you can understand. So this is the slide. The multiple inclusion problem starts here. That essentially what is going to happen is something like this. Let me use the laser pointer. So, this is a file that I'm trying to include. Where is it starts? So I have a file called green.x, and if we go back to green.x, what green.x looks like, I guess. Okay. So it has a statement called include yellow.x. So basically the content of yellow.x is sitting on the top of green.x, and then green.x has some of its own content. So now let's say I'm going to include this green.x file in another file, let us say called red.x. Okay, and at the same time, because I have not opened green.x and I don't know what files green.x is including, I also put a statement to include yellow.x independently. Okay, so that because the hash include is a very dumb thing. Okay, it simply copies and pastes everything. This will result in something like this. So this part is coming from green.x and this part is coming directly from yellow.x. Okay, so the yellow part is basically being duplicated here. Okay, and this will result in a number of issues. Almost always it will result in some kind of compilation problem. So to do that, we have this. You basically say, let us define a token called underscore yellow, and this statement, if n def, simply means if this token is not defined, the first thing I'm doing is I'm defining this token now, and this is the part, this is the code that gets included. Okay, so when I write hash include yellow.x, this code checks whether yellow has been defined yet or not. Because it has not yet been defined, yellow gets defined and the code gets pasted. The next time when you try to include it in red.x, this particular statement, this amounts to false. Okay, and this is simple, right? If statement, it is the equivalent of if at the pre-processing level. So there is it's similar to checking a particular condition. So here what happens is, if you have put this if and def, then yellow.x will only be included once, irrespective of how many times you include it here. So that is a kind of include guard. It's a bit I know it's a bit complex, so even if you don't get it, it's fine. Okay, um, this is a highly advanced concept, so don't worry if you don't understand it. I just included it because maybe someday you will appreciate, you will understand what are these. If you in fact you start opening up the header files, you will see such statements everywhere. Okay. uh, yeah, Nehal, that is necessary, that is a part of your syntax itself, that it has to be at the at the beginning. You can define hash, you can write, I think, hash define anywhere, but not the hash include. Hash include have to be at the top. And so guys, it's fine if you don't understand it. Maybe what you can do is, I have given a small example, it's a very advanced example, that is why it is a part of your additional reading. But because last lecture of this course, I know I have covered probably far too much, but I just want, you can read this maybe later. Okay, the resources, the lectures, the slides will be there with you later as well. So maybe when you are in your second semester, third semester, fourth semester, and you know something intrigues you, what exactly is there in a header file, why something like this is happening, at that time you can open up these slides and these presentations. So don't worry, if you don't understand it, it's fine. Okay. uh so sorry, we are out of time, but we are also now officially done with our syllabus. From tomorrow onwards we will start revision. So uh and by the way, tomorrow onwards, the attendance, I mean, I'm not going to take any attendance. So if you don't want to come to the class, it's completely fine. Okay. So you guys will have another class. We'll see. At least I'll see some of you tomorrow. Okay. Uh, uh, we'll decide upon it tomorrow. Okay. It's already late, Anukul. We'll decide upon it tomorrow. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir.